All right. Proverbs 18, verse 19. A brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a castle. So what kind of parallelism is this? And before you answer, there are figures of speech here in this particular verse, but this is not an emblematic or what's my word? This is not a illustrating parallelism. I don't have my cheat sheet, so forgive me. I'm going to probably spout some of the words that I've learned and remember more than these words I've given you. So this is not a illustrating proverb, even though it does have figures of speech in both phrases. Because the figures of speech are actually secondary, which we'll see as we walk through here. So what if it's not an illustrating proverb? What kind of proverb is this? He starts with a strong city, and then he focuses in on the bars of a castle. And so I would say that's probably the better understanding, is that it is the developing. You can make a case, it is repeating, but I think because he does narrow it down to talk about the bars of a castle, that the developing is probably the better understanding, better way to explain it. So what is the subject of the first phrase? A brother. So, and this, as you read the proverb, a brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a castle. Well, I think we rightly keep the brother in perspective in both phrases, but we'll come back to that in just a second. So what is the action in the first phrase? He is offended. Now we're talking about, we're recognizing that, there's a problem here. So we're not just a brother, but a brother who has, in some way, there has been an offense against him, a brother who has been transgressed against, is actually very literally the translation there. The brother transgressed is harder to win than a strong city. So there is a wrong that is done, and this is maybe a little bit more than you would just pick out from even Strong's, if you look this word offended up in your Strong's Concordance, but it has the idea, this word transgressed is almost always describing relational wrongs. So that, obviously here, that's exactly what's going on. There's a breach in the relationship. So that this offense that has been done to the brother is not just, I've done something wrong, but I've done something wrong that has truly breached that relationship. And then he draws a comparison. What's the comparison? Harder to win. So there has been a breach in the relationship between you and the brother. And it is harder to win back, to win that brother over, than what? Than a strong city. So the comparison here is I'm trying to take a relationship, if you will. If you want to put it in martial terms, there's a relationship. There has been a breach. Now I'm trying to conquer that breach and regain that relationship. And that is being compared with a strong city. What in Solomon's day would have characterized a strong city? Yeah, a very big wall. That's the first place to think. There is a tall and a thick wall completely surrounding this city. How are you going to breach that wall? Okay, you try to climb over it. If it's a strong city, what's it going to have inside it? People with armor and weapons who are intending to keep you from climbing over the wall. It's a strong city. It's not just well fortified, it's well defended. It also is going to be well provisioned. They're probably going to have a spring or a river running through it, probably a spring in the middle of it so that people from outside can't block up the river. But it's going to have a water source inside to keep them from obviously dying of dehydration. And it's going to have large stores of much food so that they can sit there for a long time and still have plenty of food to eat. But those two things, the first two, is well protected and well defended. They're going to be the obstacles that have to be faced to get into this strong city. And it is, I know we talked about this Wednesday morning, so I don't want to repeat all of this, but it is an incredibly difficult task to take a well-fortified city. Because you're dealing now, remember, we're dealing with manpower. That's almost everything is going to be just manpower. And so are you going to get enough people to carry a large enough log to be able to punch a hole in the gates? It's iffy. It's very iffy. Are you going to have enough people to pour into a siege tower and to sacrifice their lives trying to get up to the top of the wall? Again, it's very unlikely. This was a well-fortified city is incredibly difficult to conquer. It was the hardest military task known to that era. So based on what he's saying about, the comparison that he's drawing, based on that comparison, how would you describe trying to repair a broken relationship with, in this case, a brother? And I suspect he's speaking literally, but certainly it applies in any of our close relationships. And so I would say an intimate. So how would he describe, put it in your own words, how does he describe regaining a relationship with an intimate after that relationship has been breached? Okay, nearly impossible. It is an incredibly difficult task. And then he goes on, the second phrase, and he says, now contentions. So what would be the parallel idea between the second phrase and the first phrase? Yeah, the offense and the contentions are really the parallel ideas. So there's that gives us a little bit more detail about what may have been the cause of the offense, that there was this contention, this strife between them. And he doesn't mention the brother in the second line, but who are the contentions between? Yeah, it's between you and the brother. You and this intimate. He's still talking about the same thing. So we can rightly say contentions between brothers are like, there's your comparative word here. What's the grammatical term for the comparisons that use the word as and like? Yeah, I have to keep them straight in my head. It is a simile. Thank you. So it is, here now the simile is the contentions are like what? Bars of a castle. So you see immediately the ideas, and I would say the locations. You have strong city and castle. You're both talking about fortifications, and certainly don't read castle like medieval gray stone buildings. It's not what he's talking about at all. He's talking about a fortress. It might have been. It was more than likely was a city, but it was a specifically super fortified city. It was a crucial city, maybe on a border or at a key waterway or something of that nature. And so it was a strong city, a fortified city that was a key point of defense. So if you have a fortified city and it has bars in it, not the drinking kind of bars, what might you think about them? What are those bars going to be like? Very difficult to break through. This is still this contention between brothers are incredibly difficult to repair, to break through, to rebuild the relationship. This whole proverb, Solomon is showing us the difficulty of repairing an offense. Part of what you see in the strong city, the fortified city, is you have people. One person here, one person here. And there are gates and walls and bars between them. This is that which truly separates them and closes them off. And I imagine that you have seen this in your own life and certainly in other relationships. You've seen that people, because there's a conflict, there has been some transgression which has broken that relationship. Now they're closed off. They're not talking to one another. Somebody says, I'm never talking to you again. Their relationship is closed off. And that's part of what makes it so challenging is that there have been these walls erected between you and them, and you may earnestly desire to repair it. But they have set up their defenses to keep you from repairing that relationship. One other thing I would say from this is reconciliation is often difficult. And I'm understating the case from this proverb. As you've already said, it is incredibly difficult. It requires a nuclear option in some cases, whatever that, and sometimes that's not even available, as we've already talked about. But it takes great work. Derek Kidner said, the invisible walls of estrangement are so easy to erect and so difficult to demolish. That's a great summary of what Solomon is saying. So what should we do? How do we apply this to our relationships? Be careful not to offend those with whom you're closest. Why? Why be careful not to offend them? Not to transgress against them and breach the relationship. Sometimes it's not repairable, so don't risk that. It's I think part of what Solomon is driving at with this is recognize if this relationship is broken, it's going to be a monumental task. It may be impossible to repair it, so don't break it. And then seek reconciliation, no matter how difficult. And there is an aspect of hope here in this. Because he doesn't say it's impossible. Have there ever been, in ancient history, fortified cities that were conquered? Yes, it happened on a regular basis, actually. It's possible, difficult, but possible. And so part of, I think, the hope in this is you can do it. And certainly, we would see from other Proverbs, I think we're going to come to some of them in a little bit, is that it is worth seeking reconciliation no matter how difficult it may be. So Proverbs 28:25. He who is of a proud heart stirs up strife, but he who trusts in the Lord will be prospered. So what kind of parallelism is this? Okay, this is contrasting. What's the magic word that tells us that? You see the but, it reminds us, it shows us a pretty good chance this is a contrasting parallelism. The subject of the first phrase. Okay, he, or I underline both words for the fun of it, he who, because, what's the subject of the second phrase? We see the same two words repeated in the second phrase. He who. So we're talking about a specific person being contrasted, in this case, being contrasted with another specific person. So the first person is described how? He is a possessor of a proud heart. He has this proud heart. What does he do? Yeah, he stirs up strife. So, just reading that first phrase, what's the source of strife? Pride. I'll let you, in your own time, go read James 4. He says the same thing. Pride is the source of strife. So, if there's strife, what's true? there is pride. So we go back even to Proverbs 18:19. And the contentions, there's a strife there. What is true of those brothers whose relationship has been breached? Yeah, somebody's proud. It may be one, it may be both, but there is pride present. And then he says, what's the contrasting person do? He trusts. It's very interesting that the contrast here, because these are not things that we immediately pair with one another. You don't think the opposite of pride and the opposite of conflict is trust in the Lord. And I don't think Solomon is saying these are opposites in the strictest sense, but he is contrasting the two. And he's showing us that really the antithesis, the enemy of pride, is faith. He who trusts in the Lord, the object of his trust is the Lord. And what will he have, or what will happen to him? He will be prospered. And this contrast, actually, to me, does make a lot of sense as we think through it. Look at the causes of strife. And almost every time there's strife because somebody wants something. Somebody wants a position, they want a car or house, they want more money, they want attention. They are looking to gain something. And they are willing to go to incredible lengths to get it. They're willing to break relationships to get it. They're willing to stir up trouble among others to get it. They are looking for what they define as prosperity. They are looking for the gain that they desire. And in their pride, they are promoting themselves. And what ends up happening is they cause strife. Those who trust in the Lord find genuine gain. And if we had time, we'd think through that more carefully. I would just simply say the genuine gain is not necessarily the gain the proud person is seeking. It certainly is not a self-promoting, self-aggrandizing gain. It is that which really is valuable. But he's drawing this contrast here between the one of a proud heart and the one who trusts. The one of a proud heart ends and is surrounded by strife. The one who trusts enjoys the prospering. Pride brings strife. I put it in my own words, arrogance breeds conflict. What is the opposite, the true opposite of pride? Humility. So looking at the second phrase, humility, trust in God. And then, since I brought it up already, trust in God minimizes strife. That really he is setting the comparison here between that which produces strife and that which minimizes it. Trust in God minimizes strife. I will take it a step farther and say humility is necessary to quash conflict. And then I say as well, true prosperity does not come through relational strife. True prosperity does not come through relational strife. Proverbs 17:1 says, "Better is a dry morsel with quietness than a house full of feasting with strife." And think about that. Which would you rather do? Sit at home on a holiday and have just a piece of toast, or go to your family's house where you know your cousins are going to be shouting at your brother because of something that happened 15 years ago. Your mom and your dad have split up and they're not talking to one another. And if your sisters happen to come, you know they're going to be snipping at each other the entire time. Most of us legitimately would say, no, I'd much rather have the peace than to be in a house. Even if I do have a full banquet, I've got the turkey and I've got all the fixings. I've got the macaroni and cheese with bacon on top. I have the chocolate pie with lots of whipped cream. Everything else that I could possibly desire. But the whole time I'm eating and I'm going to have to listen to them argue and shout at one another. I think I'd rather have the toast. I'd rather go to Jack's and buy it all myself and have the same thing and quiet. But, that's not the option in the proverb. So that's what he's saying. True prosperity does not come through relational strife. So how do we then apply this verse? Touched on some of these. Humble yourself before God. That is, we know from Proverbs, that's the starting point. Humble yourself before God. And then Jim said it more colorfully. Reduce your ego. Eat humble pie. So humble yourself before God. Humble yourself before men. Humble yourself before others. Prefer peace to prosperity. And this is a genuine issue that we see, and it comes up in churches, it comes up in families, it comes up at work, it comes up in neighborhoods. People think, I want this. And they get whatever it is in their mind that they've got to have, and they will do anything to get it. Even if it creates chaos and confusion, even if there's now conflict and strife everywhere, because they're so fixated on, I've got to have this. Instead of saying, no, I'm going to prefer peace, relational peace, more than having whatever I think I should have. Again, Philippians 2. Go to the New Testament, read Philippians 2, and it says much the same thing here. We also see, trust God to prosper you, not your own striving. That's the problem with the one who's willing to cause conflict, to gain. Is they're trusting themselves, they're trusting their own efforts, they're trusting their own manipulations. They feel like they're the ones who've got to make this happen. And if they don't do something, then they're going to get passed over. Somebody else is going to get what they want. Trust God to prosper you, not your own efforts. Faith is repugnant to pride. Pride is repugnant to faith. The contrast he sets up may seem a little bit odd to our ears at times, but is a proud heart and the one who trusts. They are opposed to one another. And genuine biblical faith hates pride. It must hate pride. The God that we serve hates pride. We've already touched on pride, so I'm not going to walk back through all of that. But he hates pride, and if we love him, if we believe him and serve him, we're going to also hate pride. And if I am proud, I don't need to believe. I don't need to trust. We see this in self-righteousness. We see it in the parables. Jesus' conflict with the Pharisees and the priests. They were absolutely self-righteous. They were good. They didn't need a Savior. Therefore, they refused. They did not believe. They hate one another. Faith is repugnant to pride. Pride is repugnant to faith. So what are some of the causes of conflict? First is hatred. Proverbs 10:12 says, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin. When we're not loving one another as we ought, there's strife. Pride, we've already touched on that. Proverbs 13:10 says, by pride comes nothing but strife. It's really that simple. Strife is caused by pride. Proverbs 15:18 tells us anger. A wrathful man stirs up strife. Proverbs 29 tells us an angry man stirs up strife. Not only that, wickedness. Sin causes conflict. A perverse man sows strife. One who is perverse with his words, particularly. Who speaks evil, speaks ill. He doesn't speak what he ought to, but he turns aside from truth with his words. His wickedness stirs up strife. Folly. A fool's lip enter into contention. Just the basic foolishness that Proverbs warns us against causes strife. The fool just kind of falls into strife. We also see that the scorn, the scoffer, causes strife. So the fool, more times than not, falls into it. The scoffer stirs it up. Proverbs 22:10 says, "Cast out the scoffer and contention will leave. Yes, strife and reproach will cease." The scoffer, the scorner, this worst of fools, is one who is himself an inciter of conflict. He likes to see relationships burn. Gossip. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no talebearer, strife ceases. That's an emblematic, a illustrating proverb. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. There's the picture. The reality being pictured is where there is no talebearer, where there's no gossip, strife ceases. And so, we also see that argumentativeness causes strife. As charcoal is to burning coals and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. So another illustrating proverb. But this contentious one, this one who delights in arguing. And let me say, I think this is in the fact of the word contentiousness. It does have a very much a negative impact. And certainly there are times where it is good and profitable to disagree and to debate and discuss that disagreement. But the delight in disagreement and the desire to stir it up is a problem. It causes conflict. Let me give an illustration. I don't remember how many years ago this was, but a number of years ago, Jim and I were sitting at the table at lunch, and I don't remember the subject, but we were arguing about something. And I know that's hard to believe. But we were arguing about something, and for both of us, there was no... It wasn't an argument in the sense that we were at one another, mad at one another. We were disagreeing on a subject, and we're just going back and forth on it, as sometimes we do. And at some point in time during that conversation, because we're at lunch and there's other people at the table, and I think we were on opposite sides of the table, so we're kind of going back and forth across everybody else. You know, at some point in time, I realized others are not understanding what we're doing. And I'm realizing that there are some who are beginning to think we're really mad at each other. And some who are really, in their own mind, escalating the issue that, at least from my perspective, wasn't that big a deal to be escalated. And I know afterward, there was conflict beginning to build, not between Jim and I, but between others who had heard it. Okay, that's fine. Others who had heard it, there was a little bit of conflict, and I realized people are starting to take sides on some of these things. And you know, thankfully it didn't go far. We were able to deal with it very quickly, and it never became an issue, which is part of why you don't remember it. But I recognized at that point in time that just us, a good-natured argument, was causing conflict. In part because of the forum, we should have been doing it privately. And in part just because too much arguing creates conflict in a group. And those who love that, who delight in always butting heads with somebody, are going to cause conflict, not just between them and the one they're debating with, but between others that are impacted by this relationship. And so there's a ripple effect of argumentativeness. How do we end conflict? What does Proverbs teach us about it? As we've already discovered, it's difficult. Proverbs 17:14 is a very interesting picture here. The beginning of strife is like releasing water. So I'm going to change the analogy a little bit. I've had to do this on a couple occasions. I try not to do it. But crawl up under a car and begin to unscrew the drain plug on the oil pan. And once you unscrew that and you pull it out, the oil starts pouring out. And now for some reason I've discovered I've got to stop this. What's going to happen when I try to stop that flow of oil out of the oil pan? I'm going to get dirty. And there's, depending on when I do this, there's enough pressure coming out that I'm not only splashing oil everywhere, but it actually makes it harder to put the drain plug back in. And that's just a little 4 or 5 quarts there. You take a tap and you take the tap out of the side of a 50-gallon barrel. It's full of water. You unscrew a plug there and try putting that back in. And that's really the picture. You start releasing water out of a reservoir and then try to plug it up once it's going. It's not easy to do. Therefore, he says, stop contention before quarrel starts. It's difficult to end conflict. So the best thing to do is don't let it happen. Before the conflict starts, stop it. See it coming. Proverbs says that a wise man, he's looking ahead. The fool is the one who just walks oblivious into evil. The wise one looks ahead and sees this is going to lead to conflict. I'm going to do something else so that we do not end in conflict. Ending conflict is wise. It is honorable for a man to stop striving, since any fool can start a quarrel. Which is harder, stopping a fight and ending it? Which requires more skill and wisdom? Starting or stopping. Yeah, that's what he says. Any fool can start a quarrel. Any idiot can cause a fight. It takes wisdom to end it. How do we do it? How do we resolve conflict? Proverbs 25 tells us, debate your case with your neighbor. Do not disclose the secret to another. Private resolution. That's where it starts. The private resolution. Sometimes it requires an impartial arbitration. Proverbs 18:18 says, casting lots causes contentions to cease. So in the Proverbs here is roll the dice. Flip a coin. I mean, that's part of what he's saying. It's just find that impartial arbiter and let the decision rest on them and then go with it. And so sometimes, again, Proverbs is not addressing every situation. It's not giving, particularly in this case, it's not giving an absolute rule for everything. But this is a valid option. I would say private resolution is always necessary. It's always the first step based on Matthew 18. You don't necessarily always have to flip a coin, but there are times where it's worth considering. Sometimes we have to separate from the argumentative. Better to dwell in a corner of a housetop, or better to dwell in a wilderness. And both verses end with, than in a house with a contentious woman, or then with a contentious and angry woman. He's saying, when you're with the argumentative, the one who delights in strife, who is always angry, stirring up strife, sometimes it's better just to distance yourself. Go sleep in the garage. Yeah, maybe a modern way of saying what he's saying. And of course, these Proverbs is specific examples of general principles. We don't limit this just to women. It's not only that women can be contentious and cause strife in a household. Sometimes the husbands do too. I think, my wife is laughing at me. Thank you. You're very supportive there. So we recognize it's not just a marriage relationship. We should recognize it's not just a marriage relationship that this would apply to. There are other relationships we recognize that's a person who delights in causing trouble. They're always angry. They're always a troublemaker. I'm going to distance myself from them. I'm not going to hang around with them. I'm going to, say no when I'm invited to do stuff with them because they love conflict or they are angry all the time, and I'm not going to have anything to do with it. Sometimes, and that's part of that stopping it before it starts, is just not be there. Proverbs 26:20, we've already looked at the verse. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. Where there is no talebearer, strife cease. How do you resolve conflict? Sometimes you have to remove the gossip. You have to remove that one who keeps stirring up strife. And the more specific, dismiss the scorner. Cast out the scoffer, and contention will leave. Sometimes you have to just get rid of that person. And so it may be relationally, you say, I'm done. If you have that option to say, you know what, we're not hanging out, we're not friends, we're not talking on the phone. No, it's not happening. You are a scorner. You are a troublemaker, and every time I get around you, there's just another fight. There's just another problem. I'm not having anything to do with it. And sometimes it happens in the church setting. We have to remove somebody from the membership. And sometimes the one that has to be removed is the troublemaker. It's the angry or the bitter. It's the gossip. It's the slanderer that you just have to remove because they refuse to repent of their strife and strife mongering. And so there's the relational separation, whether it be a personal distancing or whether it be maybe the most extreme of I'm casting you out of this relationship, whatever it may be, that you're recognizing that I'm trying to be at peace and this person just won't let me, if you will. And there's a lot of things I could say about that. I don't take that into sometimes we identify people as toxic because they say something I disagree with or because they confront my sin. This is not at all a justification of just getting rid of somebody from your life because they don't make you feel the way you want to feel, or they don't let you live in sin the way you want to live. We have to keep this in the context of righteousness and wickedness. And if I am living in wickedness, then it is a loving person who doesn't let me be at peace and afflicts me so that I repent. And so how else do we resolve conflict? Forgive. Where he said hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin. We forgive. When one wrongs us, we forgive. Matthew 18, how many times does Jesus teach us to forgive? Yeah, so we forgive over and over, endlessly. We forgive. We resolve conflict with humility. As we already saw, by pride comes nothing but strife. So if we're going to solve the problem of strife, it starts with humility. It also requires patience. A wrathful man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger allays contention. So patience with the one who's mad. Patience with the one who even is gossiping. And again, not a permissiveness of the sin, but we don't have to respond. We certainly do not respond in kind, but we respond to their evil with good. And part of that is a patience with them. Again, Derek Kidner, I think, nails it. He says, quarrel depends more on people than subject matter. Think about that. Why are we fighting? Well, you wouldn't. Well, I wanted. Well, you said. No, that's not why you're fighting. You're fighting because of this person and this person. There is certainly pride and sin present in the people. If you both were walking in humility, trusting God, practicing patience, would there be an argument? Would there be conflict and strife? No, you'd agree with me on everything and be the end of it. So, thank you. I'm glad you're paying attention. So.
Wait a second. I disagree with that.
What Proverbs teaches and what Kidner summarizes so well is that it depends on us far more often. It's our fault far more often than it's the issue. And then very, very quickly here, I know I'm out of time. What do we do with this? Summarize all of it. Stop the conflict before it starts. Control your emotions. Proverbs 25:28. Whoever has no rule over his own spirit is like a city broken down without walls. You have no defenses if there is no rule over your emotions. Control your emotions. Pick your battles. You don't have to fight about everything. There are some things that we need to stand for. We must defend vigorously. But we don't have to argue every time somebody's wrong. We don't have to correct every error somebody makes. Somebody can actually think something wrong and it be okay. We don't have to fight about everything. Sometimes the only way to resolve conflict is to get rid of the troublemaker. I've already said that various ways. But do not love an argument. Now, I say that one carefully because a good exchange of ideas can be profitable. And yet, we should not delight in the argument for the conflict's sake. And I think there is the difference there. When we appreciate the exchange of ideas in which we're truly sharpening each other, learning from one another, speaking and listening to one another, we can profit from that mutual instruction and edification. But a lot of times people love arguments because it gets their adrenaline going. They like a good fight just for the sake of it. And we must not love the argument at all. If you're angry, stop talking. I know it's a hard one to do sometimes when you're angry, but stop talking. You're not going to help the situation. And then promoting peace promotes joy. It says, deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but counselors of peace have joy. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. That's what we should be.